Hey there YouTube! Welcome on back to Artichoke Dip. My name is Rob, Solo Tabletop Gamer, and this is video 4 of my series of my solo RPG. So before we get into everything, if you liked the video, please click the like button, and if you have not subscribed, click that subscribe button followed by the bell icon, and every time I upload a new video you'll get notified so you won't miss one. But before we jump into the thick of things, I want to talk about some cool products that are out there for your solo RPG that I use quite a bit with my gaming, and I think will help you guys as well. One of the books I really enjoy is this one right here, The Book of Random Tables and Quests by Matt Davids. And the cool thing about this author and what he does is you're not limited to just purchasing his books, whether through Amazon or whatever else. You can go to his website at www.dicegeeks.com, and there is just tons of free material that you can use. You can download to a PDF and print it right out to be used onto your game table or keep it on your device, whatever you decide. So I wanted to get that out there. That's a cool tool that we have at our disposal, and particularly in this time that we're living in, we're social distancing and all that, and it's hard to get out, and our funds are kind of low. This is a really invaluable tool that we can use at our disposal right now. But you can also, at that point, join me on Facebook as well, and I'll leave a link to that address and see what other solo tabletop gamers out there are doing as they move along with their quests and their stories, and just tons of other great resources that you can draw upon. So let's jump into the thick of things. It's at this point that they return to the compound. Corporal Clegg, his life is hanging in, well, how shall we put this, in the balance. And also at this time in the infirmary, Sergeant Winters is strapped down to a bed. He is in a catatonic almost state, and he keeps blurting out the word Marie as if he's engaging with this person somehow. Doctors are observing him and studying to figure out what exactly is wrong with him and how to fix it. More on that to come. But let's jump into the thick of things and let's see how this part of the story unfolds. Corporal Clegg has fallen into a rather dark place. A very, at this point he is in the safe haven hospital fighting for his life, and he is unknown to that at this point. He is in such a seriously deep state of unconsciousness. He is unaware of time, space, or anything. The only thing that he can even rationalize at this point in his mind is just the vast darkness of emptiness, of nothing, blackness. In the inner blackness of his mind, he notices a small light that begins to get brighter and brighter, and it's the only thing he has to focus on. He begins to walk towards the light, and he notices the quicker he walks, the larger this light begins to get, until he's into a full-out run. And as he's running towards the light, he notices out his peripheral vision, what he perceives as shadowy specters moving in the shadows. Some of them seem to be trying to claw him, while others are trying to run after him just to try to get a grip on any part of his clothing to drag him back into the darkness. It's at that point, as he looks back and he sees this lumbering, large, just huge black mass of a shadow that's about 5 times his size, with dimly lit red eyes that seem to appear almost translucent, like a red color of vapor. And at that moment, just as this thing's getting ready to reach out and grab him, he notices he is just surrounded by a blue light, completely motionless. He stops and looks around. He's completely confused at this point. Corporal Clegg, I'm going to roll and see. Now, I'm going to stress again, he's in a very deep state of consciousness, fighting for his life right now. So he's almost in what you would call a dream state. Okay, it's at this point in the video I just want to point out that that's where this book has come in handy, and I've been using a lot of it. Now, I've been keeping track of their sanity through the RPGs since the beginning, but in fact this is the part of the encounter of the game that I decided to really incorporate the Call of Cthulhu. So a lot of the roll checks that I am making that you'll see here are against his sanity, because that's what's at stake here, in fact, is his sanity. And I want to see how he'll fare against this encounter, and whether he's going to make it out the other side, or will Corporal Clegg perish. Well, let's keep watching to get that answer to that question. So, as he's looking around and scanning the environment around him, he's feeling to see if he's got any weapons or anything, and then he feels his sidearm. He grips a hold of his pistol really tight, and as he looks down, he notices hanging from his belt on his other leg is his machete. He takes a deep breath and grips the blade of his machete, thinking, at least, thank God, at least I have something to defend myself. In the distance, he sees what appear as a mirage, as a movement. And then, before he can quite pinpoint the speed or how fast this thing is moving, out of his peripheral, he notices what seems like something on him just immediately ready to attack. He turns, and a big column of stone. He looks, and as he's studying it, as if it's always been there, and he just has never noticed it until now. He hears a crumpling noise from this way. As he turns around, another stone yet appears, followed by another here, and then another a little further out here. As he looks, he's trying to comprehend all of this, and it's at this point I'm going to do a sanity roll to see how he's handling this. Obviously, well, the encounter he's going to face, it's going to be much higher. So this is going to be a difficulty class 14 for him here. So he rolls a 16. He, at this point, is well aware of his surroundings and is quite determined at defending himself. He knows he's vulnerable out here amongst these. And as he moves around slowly, looking to see if he can see anything that may be using this as cover to attack him. It's at that point he hears a voice behind him that sounds quite menacing and very unhuman, to say the least. As he turns to face where the sound of the voice is coming from, he sees what appears as a wafting cloud of just absolute blackness and little orbs of light that seem to shoot like comets and fizzle out as soon as it reaches the end of where this blackness that looks like a gas vapor and tendrils just rolling and moving across everything it comes in contact with. This thing right here comes out of the blackness. It emerges, towering over him. Its long tendril fingers reach down, making a very unsettling, leathery-like creaking noise, and he notices the sharpened claws at the end of its bony fingers. Its red eyes glow with fury. Well, let me see how he's going to react to this. Let's see. So he rolls a 17 against the sanity. He's bound and determined to defend himself. This thing speaks, and when it does speak, it sounds like a very deep, gravelly, demonic type of voice that says, "So I see you have strayed into my Shadowlands. It's at that point you have interrupted something that was dedicated to me. For that, you must pay. And as I watch, your soul is caught in the balance of it all." Corporal Clegg looks up at him, and he's just like, he's just filled with rage. He draws his sidearm, aiming it at this thing, and he's going to shoot at it. As he pulls the trigger, bam, 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 he notices the bullets as they go through. It's just like running through a whiff of cloud as this thing just laughs very deeply, and its laugh just echoes and burrows across this landscape. Soon he notices the once white light begins to fade to this weird ethereal blue all around him, and emits into a vaporous type of flame. And the darkness coming off of this thing just ensues and grows across the entire landscape, darkening it. Let's roll his sanity to see how he's holding up against this. Oh, he's going to lose some sanity points on that one. Not that much, though. Corporal Clegg clears his throat and screams out, "What do you want? What do you want from me?" And he says, "Of course, your soul. I was promised one today, and one was not delivered. So I'll have to take yours within its place." He says, "Look below you." As this creature points, he notices the ground underneath him, an image as it all goes to black. and then in the center there's a small red ball, and as it grows it gets larger and larger, like the little ray of light that he followed into this area. As it comes up to the circumference of this area, he notices that it's just breathed in flame, and he can hear just 1,000 voices of people crying out in agony and pain and screaming for help and begging for mercy. He looks back up at him as he laughs. He laughs and he says, "But," he says, "I, unlike the other gods that you feeble creatures have worshipped before me," he says, "I am not without mercy. I will give you a chance to at least defend yourself. And if you win, you get to leave this realm until our next meeting. But if not, I will take your soul and it will stay here with me." This is the point where, doing the solo RPG, I really got to the gaming session that I really did enjoy. It was this part, and designing this encounter with the Call of Cthulhu in mind. But the fact that I'm using so many different source materials to kind of throw this thing together, I noticed going through this book, it didn't have an encounter that, well, I really wanted to put in there for Corporal Clegg to face. I wanted something a little bit more nightmarish, a little bit more ancient to the times that Corporal Clegg lives in. So it's at that point that I turn to the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition Monster Manual. And in here, I decided to add this into the encounter. And as we'll see coming up, it worked out very well. I had a lot of fun with this. And as RPGs go, sometimes encounters leave you with more questions and answers and open up even more plot hooks and storylines you can go with. So, to give you a reference of what this guy's going to be faced up against, and I'm going to show you how what I changed a little bit from what was here in the Monster Manual. The fact is, you were supposed to roll what effect the sword had for this encounter, and he gave you 6 options, but I decided to go in a different direction with that and give this encounter the ability on every attack to be able to, at that point, readjust its ability that it could, at that point, enchant the sword with. So, I don't want to spoil too much. I'll tell you what, let's get back to the video and see what happens next. Forever. Let me roll and see how he reacts to that little proposal. At that point, Corporal Clegg just, he snaps and he looks at him very eager, very determined, and clears his throat and says, "There's only one God that I follow. And my God, He is not as forgiving or merciful as you." He says, "I'll accept your challenge, but I think in the end you're going to lose." This creature begins to laugh, and his laugh is rolling and rolling and beckoning and echoing out of him. And what Corporal Clegg sees next is this thing just vanishes, as well as the 4 rocks that are around him. The next thing he hears is a loud clap of thunder. A streak of lightning comes down. It's so bright it momentarily blinds him. The only thing he can see is white. He raises his hand to cover his eyes, and after his eyes readjust and he looks, he notices he's on, once again, this blue ethereal plane, where as he looks down and each step he takes, it looks as if it's burning flame, but it doesn't burn him and it doesn't harm him. But as he looks closer at it, he can see these embers that just continuously burn in different colors, and the closer he looks, he almost swears as if he sees faces of shadow creatures that look up at him briefly for a second and then fade into undescribable wisps of fiery vapor cloud that raise. He looks up and he sees a gate that he comes to next. And just like before, he is dumbfounded as to what he is seeing or where it has even come from. As he stops and he looks up, and he's studying everything to, well, see if this is a trap or not. I'm going to see if he notices anything. So I'm going to roll a save against my will. I want to see if he notices if this is an illusion or what's going on. As he's looking at this bizarre gate with these two cloaked figures like so in front of an iron gate, and behind it, as he looks through, you can see what looks like snow falling in the back. And the closer he looks at it, he notices that the snow is almost reflective, and before he can even try to rationalize in his mind what he's looking at, the gate is gone, and before him is this large wall that runs right here in front of him. Best way he could rationalize it is a huge wall made of glass, but more than a glass, it's a mirror, a reflective mirror, almost like extremely well polished silver, if you will, in a way. Just, it's such a high quality reflection off of the surface that he is amazed for a moment. And as he studies his reflection and he looks, he notices abdomen and the blood stain that runs down the front of him with the arrow sticking out. And he remembers for a brief second that he was injured, and snaps really quickly into a memory of making it inside the safe haven compound door before he lost consciousness completely. His memory is broken though at that point, and to his horror, I should say, he hears a sound of, best described as glass, not breaking, but glass shards that are floating on a ripple of water. Out of this reflective surface, a huge figure walks out with a helm upon its head with two demon horns coming out of it and large black wings spread open far and wide, adorned in armor pieces of fire just burning and ravaging, but not affecting him one bit. He holds a large broadsword that seems to emanate a glow, just like the other creature that he encountered before him. So at this point, this thing comes into the play. As he looks, he sees it move through this reflective wall. It steps out towards Corporal Clegg. Its eyes seem to be two small, red, intense sources of light that, as he notices, are pupils that watch him, and is watching every single move that he makes as he reaches down to grab his pistol and takes his other hand to rest it on his machete. The creature does not say much to him at all, and just sidesteps him a little bit, just kind of sizing him up, looking at him. It's at this point this infernal thing speaks, and it says, "You can give up now, and you can yield to me, the Death Knight of your god, and give yourself to the infernal realms to be tortured for eternity, or you can foolishly try to fight me, which you will lose, and I will only make your stay in the abyss even worse than what if you were just to give up and go there for yourself." Corporal Clegg at that point, let me see how he's recouping to this with sanity. Well, this has kind of jarred him a little bit, and he's not doing so good at this point. He's going to take 4 more points of sanity damage. Okay. This ought to be rather interesting, to say the least. So at that point, this creature bellows out, laughs. Then he says, "A duel to the death then." He lifts his sword up, and the black, weird, emanating energy just poof, like a flame. The creature at that point says, "Ready your weapon and prepare for death, mortal." Alright, so it's going to go over to Corporal Clegg. And let's see what his best course of action here is going to be. Okay. So, Corporal Clegg draws his pistol and begins to fire at this creature. Let's see how this plays out for him. Oh. That's going to be 2d4 damage. That's 1, 4. Alright. So he pulls the trigger, pop, 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 and one of the bullets he notices grazes this creature's cheek, and he puts his hand up there and wipes it and looks at what can only be perceived as blood, but just at that point turns into an ethereal vapor and evaporates into nothing. The creature looks over at him, and its eyes at that point flare up with flame around the pupil, and its face becomes more apparent of this grotesque, deformed, demonic looking face looking at him, and he says, "My turn." He raises his sword. And he says, "Here, let's see how you deal with a blade of shadow." And the sword at that point becomes black as night. The blade vibrates with this bizarre, weird, ethereal reflection, if you will. Just a source of black metallic light reflecting. The creature winds up. And as he comes down with the blade, he slashes into Corporal Clegg. Oh boy. Corporal Clegg at that point, as the blade comes down, he feels it cut into him, and he can feel his body being thrown in a backwards direction. And as his body, at that point, his legs come up facing towards what he perceives as the sky, he sees just this horde of shadow creatures that are all gathering and swarming on top of one another, and almost what looks like razor sharp teeth and saliva drips coming from them. He's hurled into the crowd, and he can feel the coldness consume him and hear the sound of these things just ripping at his flesh, at his back, and tearing at every part of him. He struggles at that point to pull himself away from the crowd of these creatures. And let me see how his save will do. We're going to do a reflex save for that one. Okay, so he's able to pull himself away from it and crawl back away from this wall of shadow. And he's swinging his machete wildly and contacts a couple, and they recoil back into the shadow. He turns around, gathering himself, looks at this creature, and screams out, "Let's dance." He charges at this thing. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. As he comes in with the machete, he just tries to attack towards a vulnerable point on his leg, hopefully disabling the creature. Let's see how he does. Oh! As he goes to bring his machete down to contact it, the creature's sword blade comes down, blocking it, and his machete just shatters like glass in a plume of basically powderized metal, if you will, in front of his face. The creature looks down and its eyes flare up once again, and this time he notices this evil, grimacing grin upon its face as it winds up the sword to come back down upon him. At that point, the creature says, "Why don't you feel the suffering of your soul of draining away to the abyss?" The sword at that point begins to emanate with a fiery red glow, and flames billow from the tip of it, and he can hear the sound of the people screaming in torment as the blade comes down. Oh. As Corporal Clegg sees this thing moving towards him, he, at that point, rolls away from the attack of the blade onto his shoulder and scurrying back. The blade hits the ground and makes a loud ping, and flames of fire dance about and are absorbed into this ethereal plane and sucked back down. Corporal Clegg looks back up at this creature and at that point grabs his pistol in a shaking hand, aims, and goes to fire at it again. He pulls the trigger, and each time this creature just waves the sword back and forth. You can hear the bullets just ting, 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 ricocheting off the blade. As the creature steps up above him, he raises his blade up into the air once again. And he says at that point, "Embrace your death, embrace your eternity forever, mortal." The blade comes swooping down, but this time, instead of being a flame, he notices the blade seems like a black billowing cloud. And as it slices through him, he can smell the distinct smell of decay and rot. He instantly is frozen, and immense pain just surges through his entire body to the point that his knees give out and he falls right to the ground, throwing his hands out to catch his balance from falling completely on his face. At that point, he feels another surge of pain. He can feel his life force being just sucked right out of him, and he can see what appears to be wispy clouds of spiritual energy, if you will, exiting his body and being absorbed into this ethereal flame that's all around them. Corporal Clegg at that point pushes himself back up, looks up at the creature, and hits the button. The magazine, empty magazine, falls out of the bottom of his gun. He grabs another one, slams it in, cocks the gun, and then says, "Here, eat this, you asshole," and begins to pull the trigger at. Oh. The creature at that point takes his left leg, kicks his hand, and the gun flicks right out of his hand and slides back behind him. He is left unarmed at this point. The creature winds up his blade once again, and his eyes grow with intense fury. He says, "Here, take another hit," and he swings down upon Corporal Clegg. He feels the blade cut through him again, once again smelling the rotten smell of decay and feeling a surge of pain just come right over him, only just to cripple him once again. At this point, he finds himself prone on his back, just screaming in agonizing pain. Two. I want to see if he has anything left within him to pull himself up. So I'm going to roll a strength save. And considering my opponent, he's going to have a difficulty class here of a 13 to make this one. Oh, yeah, he doesn't make it. He tries to pull himself up, but he does not have the strength. The immense pain that he's experienced has just drained him of all his strength. It's at that point the creature steps right up on top of Corporal Clegg, taking one of its huge, massive boots and boom, stomping it into his chest. He is just frozen and exhausted from his battle with this thing. He has never engaged an enemy like this before in his life, and he cannot move. He is just, at that point, paralyzed. The creature, with its other hand, grabs a hold of Corporal Clegg's skull, and he can feel its fingers at that point dig into his flesh and rip his head from the ground, pulling his body up, and he's as limp as a rag doll as this thing is now holding him by one arm, by his head, up into the air. From what he can see, behind this huge winged, massive, night-looking creature, this other bizarre creature of nightmares comes from behind him, and the black cloud of energy at that point just whiffs and billows all around. He says, "Good, very good." He says, "So, looks like you belong to me." His long claw at that point lashes into the abdomen of Corporal Clegg. He feels its long, bony fingers at that point clawing its way through his chest, up into his brain stem. And at that point, he can feel pressure into his skull. And at that point, he feels his eyeballs begin to just become extremely painful, to the point that he hears them make a popping noise. And he screams out in agonizing pain as everything goes black, and then he feels this immense amount of heat upon him and hears the screaming coming from what he can only guess. It is at that point Corporal Clegg is awakened. He opens his eyes, and as he looks around, he sees familiar surroundings. He recognizes he's in the infirmary of the safe haven, and he sees a familiar face, an older doctor, a kind gentleman with gray hair and glasses. He looks over his glasses at him and he says, "Just rest, Corporal." He says, "You sure as hell earned it." He says, "We had almost lost you. You were almost gone, but luckily," he said, you had Hannah with you. She is one smart cookie, and she knew what to do to save your life to get you to us right here. This is quite lucky." He's like, "Go ahead and get some rest." And he says, "Let the pain medication do its job. We'll talk in a bit." At that point, Corporal Clegg sits there staring around at his surroundings, questioning himself at this point. Is this real? What he experienced, was that real? And did he die coming into the compound, or what is going on here? Okay, with that weighing heavy on his mind, I'm going to do another save to see if he loses any more sanity on that one. No, he does not. So he's more or less level-headed at this point and has taken it quite easy. He's, at this point, realizing that he's alive and he is in the infirmary in the compound. Okay, my friends, there we have it. As you see, Corporal Clegg, as he's sitting in his hospital bed right now and being pumped full of fluids and painkillers, is trying to wrap his mind around, what did he experience? Was it real? Wasn't it real? Or what is real at this point? Now, with my solo RPG, what I really like to do is at the end of that session, so what I mean by that, at the end of the session, this is the first session that I played. They had went outside, they had their first encounters, they had come back. I like to end it on a cinematic note before I start a whole new session or chapter, if you will. And at that point, I like to handpick the encounters and put them in there, along with the environment, and give them the variables they need to make it cinematic at that point. And it works out very well. It gives pretty good closure to that chapter in your game scenario. And I brought that up before in previous videos to where if you, however you are doing your solo RPG, if you are writing it down or you're doing it on a device or what have you to make your notes, it's typically a way I like to do it to close it out. And on top of that, it just keeps the story expanding and gives you more plot lines to pick up on and shoot off with, to where it's not slowing down, it's not railroaded, it's not just going in one direction and then over time you're going to become bored with it. It just gives you a lot more opportunities at that point to take the game to different places, maybe when you first started out, that you never thought it would go. So I really enjoyed that. That was a great game session that I had. I have video of more because, like I said, the nice thing is I can just set up the camera and play my game session and go through it and then go back through and review it and, you know, make the highlight notes that I need to make for my personal records to keep track of the story and how everything goes. So, with that in mind, my friends, game on. And I guess in the next episode, we will find out what happens even further with the characters in this weird, bizarre, hostile world that I have created. And now I have fully introduced the elements of the Call of Cthulhu in. And I still have to answer the question, what about that tarot card? Does that tarot card have anything to do with what Corporal Clegg has encountered or not? And what's going to happen to Sergeant Winters? But the other question is Hannah Smith. What's going to happen with her as a result of all of this? And how will General Pearson take everything? So all of those questions and more will be answered in the future, but I think this is where it's a good point to leave this video off. So remember, my friends, if you liked the video, click the like button, and if you have not subscribed, please click the subscribe button followed by the bell icon and you will get notified every time I upload a brand new video. Alright, this is Artichoke Dips signing off.